I'm Nick Shalek. I'll be moderating the panel. Just by way of introduction, I'm an investor at Ribbit Capital. We're an active investor in the space. We are also, as regards to this panel, investors in Coinbase, where I'm an advisor and work very closely with the team. So I guess we've got four of the kind of great top entrepreneurs in the space today, and I'll let them kick it off. We'll kind of go down the line, and you guys maybe can talk about, say a little bit about your background, and then tell us a little bit about what the company that you run does.
Sure. So I'm Brian. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Coinbase. My background is software engineering. So before this, I was working at Airbnb as a software engineer. We were doing payment integrations to 190 countries all over the world, and I was working on fraud prevention and a number of tools around that. So yeah, studied computer science and economics in college, and you wanted me to share a bit about
Coinbase.
Coinbase.
Yeah,
okay, Coinbase is a easy-to-use Bitcoin wallet. We also help people exchange it into their local currency, and we help merchants accept Bitcoin payments. So those are kind of the three pillars of our business: consumer wallet, exchange, and merchant services.
So my name is Nicolas, Cary, and I'm the CEO of Blockchain.info. My background is in entrepreneurship. I started my first company when I was 16 years old with my best friend building websites, and I studied economics and business in college, and then I worked for a startup right after school, after a trip to India, and we built CRM products. So basically spent my entire life building software and teams and learning about user experiences. And today I bring all that sort of experience into thinking about how to build a blockchain. So Blockchain.info is the world's most popular Bitcoin website, and we're really a few different products and services. It's a search engine for the Bitcoin economy, and we're doing 300 and 350 million page views a month, which is pretty neat, 3 to 4 million unique visitors. And then on the wallet side, we have 1.4 million wallet users all over the world. Our wallet is translated into 18 different languages, so we see people from all over planet Earth come use us. And then the last piece is Zero Block, which is a real-time news application and trading platform, which we acquired in December, and more recently have also acquired RTBTC, which is the trading platform side of that. So we're looking forward to bringing more liquidity to the exchanges across the markets and continuing to build the team.
Yes, I'm Tony Gallippi. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Bitpay. My background, I'm a mechanical engineer, got interested in financial markets and options trading. And we started Bitpay around 3 years ago, so May 2011, which is pretty early in the Bitcoin space. I think the price of Bitcoin was around $2 when we started Bitpay, so we've been around a while. Bitpay is a merchant service for Bitcoin. That's the only business that we do. We make it easy for businesses to accept Bitcoin as a form of payment. We think we do that better than anybody else in the world. So right now we got about 28,000 merchants in about 160 countries around the world. More than half of those are outside the United States. And we offer our merchants the ability that if they don't want to be exposed to any volatility of Bitcoin, they don't have to be. We can settle directly to their bank account each day.
I'm Chris Larsen. I'm the CEO of Ripple Labs. Before Ripple Labs, I was CEO of a company called Prosper. Prosper was a peer-to-peer lending marketplace. Before that, I was CEO of a company called eLoan, which was an online lender. Ripple Labs is a software company. There's about 45 of us, mostly developers and cryptographers, just a couple blocks from here. We're a software company. We exist to support enterprise and developers to develop on the Ripple protocol. The Ripple protocol is an open source distributed real-time settlement system. The idea behind Ripple is to use the breakout technology of Bitcoin, which we view as sort of confirmation of financial transactions without a central operator. We think that's a powerful idea, but use it to build a currency-agnostic real-time settlement system so it can operate in any currency instantly, globally, sort of trying to build an internet for value exchange.
Great. Maybe we'll do one more down the line and start with you, Chris. I'm curious, as you guys look at your business and the environment around Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, what do you think it takes, either from your side and externally, for your business to be 10 times larger than it is today?
Yeah, so we're really focused on building a developer community specifically around the Ripple protocol. So we think it's essential that you get the leverage of tens of thousands of developers seeing an opportunity to make money by building on these free rails. That's what's so cool about these protocols is they're free for everybody just to develop whatever they want to develop on. So it's essential to build that community, and we're really beefing up resources there. The other thing we think it's really essential that we get incumbents, the incumbent banks, financial institutions. I know that's sort of hearsay when this industry started, but I think increasingly that's just a crucial breakout that we've got to accomplish, particularly here in the US. So we're getting close. We're meeting with institutions and banks all the time. Obviously, there's tons of reputational blowback, I'm sure we'll talk about here, that has been a setback over the last couple of months. Weirdly, though, at a time when the regulators seem to be getting a lot friendlier. But that's super critical. So really getting the incumbents, the enterprises, the institutions, as well as that developer community.
How about you, Tony?
I think we need to focus on what we do best, which is payments for merchants. And, I think we really pride ourselves on our customer satisfaction. We've got a team of 6 people that are dedicated to making sure that all of our merchants are taken care of, in addition to, all of our implementation teams that help get our merchants up and running in the first place. So, what we really want to focus on is just building a really good business, making sure that our customers are taken care of, that they're satisfied, and we think the rest of it will come.
Yeah.
So growing by tenfold is a goal for Blockchain.info this year, and we want to keep that velocity. I think for us, the key is going to be to continue to focus on the user experiences, and this is something that Bitcoin has struggled with at the beginning of its growth, I think. We have to make things easier. We have to build beautiful technology that's fun and attractive and something that anyone can get used to using. People use email in their lives every day, but they don't really know how it works underneath the covers, and we have to get Bitcoin to that level, at the wallet level, at the merchant level, and the protocols and other things as well. So that's something we're spending a ton of time on, and we'll make enormous investments in this space over the course of the year, and that's something we're focused on.
Yeah, same here. For 10x growth, we focus on really 3 things. It's ease of use, building trust in the space, and becoming a platform. So in terms of ease of use, Bitcoin is super powerful, but most people today are a little intimidated by the idea of a Bitcoin address. Why does it have these characters? It looks like a password. Do I have to memorize it? And we want to focus on making it accessible to non-technical people. The second, building trust in the space. Trust comes from all kinds of things. It could be good design. It could be a fast website. It could be trustworthy merchants that you're interacting with, or a curated platform. So the third would be a platform, and by that I mean a site where people can build all sorts of ideas and integrations on top of Bitcoin. So again, there's some things that are hard to get right at the infrastructure layer. There's like securely storing it, having the capability to exchange, getting compliance and the regulatory landscape kind of squared away. And so if we can take care of those pieces for other companies who want to integrate Bitcoin, they can build on top of Coinbase as a platform. And we've had about 5,000 developers build apps so far with that in mind.
So that's a good segue maybe into a next question, which is something that I know from today has been on the mind of a lot of people who've been on stage, and I know a lot of people in the audience are asking and thinking about, which is the use cases that will help bring Bitcoin its next million or 10 million or 100 million customers. I guess I'll leave it pretty open-ended. What do you think it takes for Bitcoin to go mainstream, or what use cases are you excited about seeing develop in the next year or 2 years? Yeah, sure, Chris.
So I know a lot of people talk about remittance. I think that's been talked about quite a bit. Switching it a little bit, I think intra-institutional is a big opportunity. So when you look at big banks today, a lot of them will have a brokerage, they'll have a bank, and weirdly, they have 2 different ledgers for each one of those companies. A customer wants to transfer money, they're actually wiring it or using ACH, which is kind of crazy. Between their institutions. I think that's a great way to break into institutions. It's kind of a safe way for them to test drive these protocols, have them move dollars or euro or yuan or whatever between those institutions. Using these real-time distributed settlement systems, they can do that now straight through processing, instant settlement, no cost, in a currency that they're used to today, and with their own customers, so they don't have to worry about KYC and AML. That's a nice way to test drive it, get a couple of institutions doing that. Now suddenly there's 2 institutions that are on, hey, why don't we just start transferring to each other when we have to settle between our customers? That's step 2, and then step 3 is, great, we're on these distributed protocols, let's now start offering, remittance to India in $10 amounts for free and, instantly. I think that's a nice on-ramping, and again, I think it's absolutely critical you start getting some of these first big institutions. They're all circling right now, probably a ton of them out here right now, but you need to get the first one to move, and then, like the adoption of Swift, The first one comes over, they get a huge market advantage, and then you start seeing them all come over. I think that's how we see it.
Yeah, we're interested in remittance too. I think is a great killer use case. Like the way we look at it is we say, what are people who their next best alternative is dramatically worse? So if you look at swiping your credit card at a Starbucks in person, it's slightly better to use Bitcoin. The fees are lower and things like that. It's maybe slightly more cumbersome in other ways. But if you look at somebody doing microtransactions or remittance, like you said, or somebody selling low margin products where their margin on it is only 3% or something, and their payment processing costs are 2%, those are the areas where we can have a dramatic impact by introducing Bitcoin there. And I think those are the areas that'll get adopted first, and then later people will say, how can it go from there to a wider audience?
So I've traveled kind of constantly the past 4 or 5 months, nearly 40 different border crossings, and I visited all kinds of neat entrepreneurial projects, so I can tell a little bit about some of the things I've seen that are happening outside of the borders here. I think the localization of applications is enormous. There's still a major failure, I think, at the large level for apps that is not really taking into consideration some of the needs in fragmented markets. So whether that is remittances or special wallets, I think you're going to see all kinds of neat solutions come together, and I think that'll help quite a bit. Beyond that, though, I think the user experiences are just going to be critical this year. I mean, the people that win are going to be the ones that build and design beautiful apps, and this is a call to entrepreneurs across the industry and in this room, too, is to get off the sidelines and get building, because we need you to help in this cause. And there are free APIs at Blockchain, at Coinbase, and other services. You guys have done an awesome job with Bitcore. You might want to talk a bit about that, because that's an awesome project. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Bitcore is an open source library for people that want to build stuff on top of Bitcoin. So you can use the Blockchain API or the Coinbase API. But with Bitcore, you can actually talk directly to Bitcoin. And you can do a lot more innovative stuff. You can get a lot faster response, streaming transaction history and that kind of stuff. So I think there's going to be a lot of consumer applications that are going to help with the user experience this year. But I still think that the killer app for Bitcoin is in business transactions. When you look at the accounts payable department at a company, you're typically dealing with somebody who's got to figure out how to pay people, in 5 different countries. And the average cost of a wire is $40 or $50, and if you have to pay somebody across border, $200, it just doesn't make any sense. So there's a lot of pain there today, and I think the killer app for Bitcoin is really solving the applications that have the most pain. Like Brian said, I mean, the amount of pain that you have paying at Starbucks isn't really that great. It's a pretty nice experience. But try to send $200 from here to Canada. It's actually quite painful. But there's a lot of people that have to do it, and typically it's businesses that have to do it. And businesses are just passing those costs on to consumers. So if we can help businesses save that money, I think you're going to see a lot of benefits in the economy.
Yeah, just to interrupt there, I think the killer app for Bitcoin is definitely not revolutionizing shopping. The killer app for Bitcoin is that Bitcoin allows people financial freedom and empowerment. And so working on solutions that help build that out is going to be the biggest deal of all. And it's going to happen in the second and third world for sure. I think that'll be the biggest impact.
You guys collectively represent some of the largest companies who are building on top of the blockchain. There's I know for the technical folks in the audience, which is probably most of the people here, there's sometimes a philosophical debate or divide around what transactions should be done on blockchain and what should be done off the blockchain. I'm curious, whether you have any comments in terms of applications that people may be developing and how you think about on blockchain versus off blockchain and where that fits into your product and company visions.
Sure, I can comment on that. So actually, our preference is to always be on blockchain and use the open protocol. We do offer an off-blockchain solution, which is optimized for people sending microtransactions. And we only would want to resort to that essentially when something is not possible or cost-effective on blockchain. So that's the way we look at it. We say, what do people want to do with Bitcoin? How can we do it on blockchain? And I think things like BIP70, the merchant protocol, those things are great innovations that are moving that needle where more and more things can happen on the blockchain. And if there's something people really want to do that they can't, we'll do it off blockchain. That's kind of been our approach.
Nick, do you feel similarly, or?
I think we're definitely focused on blockchain transactions. I mean, our company isn't really putting any investment or R&D into other things right now. But I think we reserve the right to change that, our thoughts on that. But right now, it's 100% on blockchain.
Gotcha.
Yeah, same here. Everything we do is 100% on blockchain, and all the open source stuff that we're releasing out is all designed to work on blockchain. So I mean, that's the whole point, right? You have a proof of payment. You have proof of property transfer and ownership. And that's the whole point of Bitcoin.
So obviously we don't build on the blockchain. We build on the Ripple protocol, which is, again, what we're trying to do is use a different method of confirmation without a central operator. We call it consensus. What we're trying to do is, again, allow it to be currency agnostic, to be fast, to be with a central operator in about 5 seconds is how Ripple works. And then the method is a peering method rather than a proof of work method, so it doesn't use meaningful amounts of electricity or computing power. But we think it kind of doesn't really matter whether it's blockchain or Ripple. The bigger thing that's going on here, I think everybody is in this together, is that you're building an internet for value exchange. And it just means that the world now can move value like it's been moving information for the last 2 decades without a central operator. Once you can do that, that's the game change. Because no one's going to trust a central operator. And that is not just people. The biggest institutions are not going to trust Amazon or Google or Alipay to be a central operator of value exchange. That's why you needed an internet for information exchange. That's why you need Bitcoin. That's why you need Ripple and all the others that are being built, wonderful things that are being built. That's why you need this in the world.
Yeah. Well, this question is a bit different for Chris, but maybe I'll start with you, Tony, given Bitcore came up before. Earlier today, Mark and Balaji talked about the pyramid, sort of inverse pyramid that we have in Bitcoin, where a lot of people are working on applications. Actually, a very small number of people are working on core development. Because I'm curious, as some of the kind of rising stars in this space, how you think about the role that your companies should play in supporting core development and helping to build the ecosystem, both technically and in other ways.
Sure. Well, I think none of us would be here if we didn't have the core of Bitcoin. We all build our businesses. We increase our own valuation upon that. So I think it's important for every Bitcoin company to contribute something to the core development. Last year we decided to hire Jeff Garzik. He's a core dev, so we pay his salary now. He works for Bitpay, but he spends almost 100% of his time just working on the Bitcoin core. He helps us a little bit with the payment protocol, but he primarily does a lot of the stuff to make sure that the overall network addresses its issues in terms of reliability, scalability, and the other things that we need to work on. So it's important. I think we'd like to continue to hire more people that can help do that. With Bitcore right now, we've got 8 employees that are just doing open source software around Bitcoin. So that's not the core dev, but it's an application layer on top of that people can build upon. But that's all open source. And so I think we're going to continue to focus that. I mean, open source is part of our culture, and I think we want to try to give back as much as we can to the core development of Bitcoin because we can't succeed without it.
Yeah, for Blockchain.info, this is something we really want to give back to you, especially going forward more. I think everyone in the community has a responsibility to return something to the pot. I would love to hire several core developers this year, and that's something we're definitely going to look at. And they won't work for blockchain, they'll work for the Bitcoin community. And we just want to find the right people that are willing to follow that mission. So that's something that's on our mind.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I think it's super important too. I wish we had have done more already. Like we've interviewed some core developers to talk about doing something similar, and we're interested in talking with more of them. So.
And Chris, I don't know if you have comments on that for Ripple, or also on the efforts to support the ecosystem more broadly, not just by investing in core devs, but also on the regulatory and banking front.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the fascinating things that's going on here that Bitcoin, Ripple, these monetary kind of distributed real-time systems, so the world's first monetizable protocols. I mean, you can't monetize HTTP, but you can monetize Bitcoin, Ripple. What we're trying to do at Ripple is, I think it came up today, but we have used this before, this idea of a Red Hat to Linux, that can we build Ripple Labs? That's all we do is work on the core of the Ripple protocol. And we want to hire as aggressively as we can. We brought on 6 new people this week, 4 of those engineers, just to work on the basic foundational protocol, and then let other awesome developers build on top of that, the platforms, the companies that serve consumers. So I think that's the opportunity the industry has. If you can monetize these protocols, you could pump enormous amounts of value, and that's how you build something that can really compete with our current financial system. And then on the regulatory, so do you want me to get
Yeah,
into that
absolutely.
as well? So the regulatory is actually going pretty well, I think, out there. When you look at what Treasury has done recently, what New York's done, what California is doing, what the IRS did, all very constructive. The weird thing, though, is that the banks are actually going backwards. The headline risk, the reputational risk has gotten worse. And it's what's weird is the institutions have been making a lot of progress. Banking institutions are very funny organizations. They're middle, they're top tiers. Are getting really comfortable, I think, with the space. But it just takes one to read a headline, go, what the heck is this? What's this arrest? What is this 400, whatever the headline is. And that's been a big setback. So while the regulatory is catching up, the regulators sort of need to, I think now, weigh into the banks and say, hey, it's okay if you guys build on these protocols. We're not going to come down on you guys. That's kind of the missing link right now. So it's a very funny period. We just need to keep working on this and talking more about building, less about disrupting. I think that's kind of how we're trying to pitch it.
Yeah, makes sense. Any other comments from you guys around what entrepreneurs, what you guys and others should be doing to try to help the banking industry come along? Because I do agree with this perspective. It seemed like we were making progress, and now maybe we've taken a bit of a step back. And something I've observed about banks, nobody likes to do anything kind of by themselves. So what can we be doing? What can people in the audience be doing to encourage banks to be more thoughtful about how they interact with this space?
Yeah,
I think a lot of it is education. When you had the U.S. Senate wanted to do hearings, I was there with a few other people, and it was a very educational session. They're clearly doing their homework. They're really trying to understand what this new technology can do, because they realized very quickly that the rules they had that have been built over the last 40 years does not apply to this new thing. And they don't want to stifle it, they don't want to kill it, but they don't have a rule that applies to it. So the best thing that you can do is engage your bank whenever they ask you questions and teach them, well, this is what it is, this is what it can do, this is what it can't do. They're going to reach their own conclusions. I don't think we're going to get safe harbor for the banks anytime soon, as much as we would like it. So the banks are still going to be on the hook if an accident happens. But we can certainly lobby to have a lot more constructive dialogue. The banks just want to know that we're doing the proper things to try to prevent money laundering and protect fraud, protect consumers from fraud. It's the same structure that exists in any type of money service business. Just because we're dealing with Bitcoin doesn't mean that we have different rules to follow, right? We have the same protections of consumers that we have to obey, and we have the same rules that we have to obey. So I think we're in a situation now where we just have to continue working at it, and the banks are not going to get safe harbor, but they're going to have to realize very quickly that they're turning business away. Banks can make a lot of money off of us as customers. And once they realize that the risk profile is get down to the point where they can justify it, they're going to step in.
Do we still have bankers in the audience? Any bankers?
No one wants to raise their hand for that. Oh, there's one.
I swear earlier there were 10 or 15. But
you're going to get mobbed afterwards.
Well, with all due respect to my colleagues that have bank accounts, there is a different way.
Uh-oh.
And Blockchain.info is a 100% bankless company. And we pay all our employees in Bitcoin. We do all of our deals in Bitcoin. We've done our acquisitions in Bitcoin. And if you're an entrepreneur thinking about how to build new services and products in this industry, you have choices you can make, and you should evaluate those pretty carefully. Over the last year, when we sold advertising partnerships with colleagues in this room, we took those deals in Bitcoin, and we hold that. And as the value of Bitcoin increases, we can reinvest more and more into the ecosystem. And it's a 100% self-cycling business. So it's a really interesting and different way of thinking about how you finance your own company. So just to be aware, you don't have to have a bank account.
Well, yeah. No, and the longer it takes, actually.
I'll
say that.
That definitely is applause-worthy.
Well, it's interesting because the longer it takes for the banks to work with Bitcoin companies, the more motivated we're going to be to do exactly what Nick has done and to find a way around it, find a way to operate as a company without a bank.
Yeah. Well, I think the key thing is you don't just want the banks supporting the companies, and that's important, obviously, but you actually want them integrating to the protocols. You actually want them to integrate like they've integrated Swift. I think that's the game changer. That's when you start seeing tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people coming onto these protocols.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think if that's a world that exists someday, people need a bridge to go from here to there. And so I love the fact that Blockchain.info is taking that approach. I think it's awesome. And I think it's also great that there's other people providing that bridge from the traditional financial rails into Bitcoin. And both people need to be in that ecosystem, so I'm glad we're both there doing that.
Well, one thing we know from previous hand raises, there are a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience. So I'm curious, You guys obviously have all been involved for a while now in the Bitcoin ecosystem and building businesses. I'll ask for advice, general advice in a second, but maybe the first question would be, what things would you like to see, or would you encourage other entrepreneurs? What problems would you be encouraging them to work on today? Either problems that have come up in your just paying attention to the ecosystem, or problems that have come up as you've been working on building your companies?
Obviously, a ton of stuff to work on. There's the obvious consumer applications globally. So there's just a ton of new applications that are yet to be built. Obviously, consumer experience matters a ton there. But I'd say if an area doesn't get enough discussion is sort of the B2B opportunity for moving value between businesses, or even intra-business, or traders on Wall Street, which is a huge category right now, obviously, and that's where it's going to start. So big opportunities there. Obviously, global identity, now that these are the first financial systems that are global, because they've all been country by country until now, you'll need some sense of global identity. That might even be distributed, which could be really interesting. Attestation is going to be super important. And those are things that could help KYC and actually help strengthen the ecosystem at the same time. So we focus on those areas.
I think, I'd love to see more exchanges all over the world. I think there needs to be this connectivity and redundancy of different ways people can get money into and out of Bitcoin all over the world. And unfortunately, right now, there's not a very long list of really large, well-established exchanges. And so if you are from another country, or you have friends there, and I think that's a real opportunity right now in Bitcoin to go to other countries, build those relationships with local banks, and be the largest player in your country for Bitcoin exchange, and build a huge business doing that. And that's going to aid remittance, it's going to aid the resiliency of the network, all sorts of things.
I would agree that there's a lot of opportunity on the on-ramps and off-ramp side of things, but I think especially for young entrepreneurs, that's going to be incredibly difficult to accomplish without substantial financing, which is something a lot of young people won't be able to have access to. So I think about sort of interesting in projects. I like games. I like ideas that bring Bitcoin into new audiences in ways they may not have otherwise anticipated. So I think there are opportunities there. Mobile apps are going to be huge in Bitcoin. There are 2.5 billion people on planet Earth that are unbanked, and you can find ways to build things for them. And I think wallet fragmentation is an inevitability this year. You're going to see wallets for parents that want to maybe track where their kids go, so there's a GPS system that shuts down their spending if they leave a certain area, or automatically deducts it if they do bad things, or wallets for people who like to do sports betting or things like that. And it's going to be, these kind of things need to get built because they serve niche audiences, and I think the more impassioned we can get people to do things. This is why Dogecoin has been so successful. It's kind of crazy to say that, but it's a big, expensive joke, but it's bringing in a huge amount of new people into it, and those people are all going to understand Bitcoin immediately too. So I think more of those things happening is good. I like the consumer adoption side of things. Merchants, the argument is really simple, but I think getting more and more consumers involved is going to be huge too. So.
Tony, on the enterprise side, anything that you would encourage entrepreneurs in the audience to be thinking about or working on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we have, on the exchange side, I think over the last year, we've probably had more exchanges close than open. So we have fewer now than we did a year ago. But one of the things that we need are some options and derivatives. I think puts, calls, spreads are something that people will need if they want to hold Bitcoin as part of their corporate treasury. They're going to want to be able to protect themselves to some downside risk. You can do that with gold, every other type of property. You can't do that with Bitcoin. So we'd like to see a really good options market. We'd like to see better interconnectivity between the exchanges. Maybe it's a prime broker type model where I can have my funds at one exchange, and if they can't get me the best price, they can go out and get it for me. I may have to pay 2 commissions for them and for wherever they ended up buying the Bitcoins for me or selling it. But that's fine. I want to be able to trust one person, and then you can start to get a consolidated order book and get much more efficient markets. So I think there's a lot to be built on the exchange side, and it's going to be involving combining these liquidity pools, making more efficient markets, and then making derivatives on top of that.
Gotcha. Well, so maybe this question will be redundant since you guys each spoke to it in a certain way. But I'm curious. For the aspiring entrepreneurs in the audience, many of whom are thinking about taking a plunge into a very complicated regulatory and banking landscape and dealing with a very new technology, any words of advice or thoughts that you'd want to share for a friend or a fellow entrepreneur?
Well, you just go fast. Don't kind of wait for permission. You guys gotta run with it. And some of the stuff can be worked out later. If you tried to button up all the regulatory issues before you did anything, you wouldn't do anything, especially in fintech. There's just no roadmap, and no one's ever going to give you a clear answer anyway. So you kind of got to get there first, and then figure out how you're going to settle in. So I think that's one thing. Also, B2B, keep in mind, B2B is going to have a lot less regulatory headaches. So consider some of that. The consumer stuff is going to go front and center to kind of all the hairy issues in fintech, and there are so many, you can get into trouble pretty easily as you get bigger. Again, early on, you're going to have a lot of free space. Later on, when you get bigger, how these guys are, that's when you got to get chief compliance officers and controllers and chief risk officers, and all the heavy stuff starts.
Just one quick thought on that, which is that, build something. There's too many people, I think, in Bitcoin that are talking about different ideas, and a lot of times you don't have very much clarity in your head about where this idea is going to go. Is it even the right idea? I think, I don't want to speak for anybody else on the panel, but I think when we all started our companies, we weren't 100% sure what it was going to be, and it's evolved over time. And the real, Paul Graham has this great quote that, startups are like a shark. The minute you stop swimming, you're dead. So if you don't know what to build, just build anything, and that'll give you the next idea for what to build. So that's my only advice.
I would say, yes, this industry is not going to reward people sitting on the sidelines. So get involved, start going to local meetups, recruit people around you, get feedback, talk constantly to people about what you're doing, and put a marketing site up the instant you have an idea, put an email address, sign up in there, start selling and recruiting people instantly, and then iterate as fast as possible and get to market. And then keep working on it. There's an awful lot at stake. This is a very early time in Bitcoin still. I always tell people, I think if Bitcoin was a clock, we're maybe in the 3rd second of its entire history still. So get out there, build something. There's an awful lot of upside for everybody, and there can be a ton of success still. And no one has nailed anything yet in this space, so keep working, and I'm sure you guys will find cool products.
Yeah, it's a funny topic came up today since it is maybe its second 3. But somebody asked me about consolidation in the Bitcoin space, and Ben, who was up here before, mentioned that we're kind of all in this together. These aren't your competitors. We all stand to benefit from Bitcoin being successful. So I'm curious whether you guys are thinking about acquisitions at all, or if you have a message you want to share with entrepreneurs out there who maybe should be working with you or on top of your platform. I thought that would be an interesting thing to offer.
So we now have an incubator that's working on top of the Ripple protocol. We give free office space just 2 blocks from here, and monetary support. We don't take a stake in the companies in the incubator. We don't want to be conflicted, but we want to support developers and entrepreneurs because that's good for the entire protocol, the whole ecosystem. So I think we think that's really important to do that, and you're starting to see other groups do the similar things.
What about you, Tony? Have you guys acquired any companies, or are you interested in acquiring companies?
Sure, we're always looking to possibly expand our portfolio. We're focused on business tools. We don't really have anything consumer-facing, so if somebody comes up with a neat business app, we'd be interested. But we're also hiring. We just opened an office here in San Francisco, so we're looking to hire maybe half a dozen engineers here over the next few months to continue to add products and features to BitPay. We've got a lot of merchants that we're landing that are asking for more and more features, and so there's just a lot of software that has to be built.
So yeah, Mike, Blockchain.info conducted, I think, the world's first Bitcoin-only acquisition in December when we bought ZeroBlock. And if you haven't checked it out, it's a beautiful iPhone and Android app for studying Bitcoin statistics, and it has a beautiful news feed in there too. And the reason we bought it was I was waking up every morning, and it was the first thing I was looking at. I was checking it 100 times a day, and it was the last thing I was looking at before going to bed. And it dawned on me, I was like, why don't we have this? And I found out it was built on blockchain APIs, which made me even more excited. And then I spoke with Dan, co-founder of ZeroBlock, and I wanted him to come on board at Blockchain to help inform our design, because I absolutely loved the app. It was stunning. And so after visiting with him, it became obvious that we could bring that app and have him nurture it under the Blockchain banner, and also get his design leadership on our product, which was something I felt we needed. So We've also done another acquisition announced just a few weeks ago. We bought Clark Moody, who's kind of a legend in the Bitcoin space, building some of the first charts, has done a lot of research on trading, and he built a real-time trading platform in his spare time. The guy was getting his aeronautical engineer, wanted to go work for NASA, and he built a huge trading platform, just, like you do on the side. And so working with him, we're going to launch Zero Block with a trading platform for institutional investors and for anyone who's doing a lot of trading. It'll sit in front of the exchanges. It won't touch any fiat currency. We only like to work with Bitcoin in this company. And we've been working on these things with entrepreneurs because for us, in a lot of ways, we love rewarding people that are building innovative and amazing things. So we're definitely on the hunt for great projects that fit nicely into the blockchain kind of ecosystem of products, and we will continue to look for things that inspire us. So I think the other side of that too is just to reward the entrepreneurs that are just doing amazing work. So yeah.
Yeah, similarly, we've done one acquisition so far, talking with 2 or 3 other companies. I think it's a really great idea if you are working on an idea, you get a spark, some traction, it's really taking off to say, how can I maximize that opportunity, either additional reach or, something like that. And it's a great way to get rewarded by having an exit and getting acquired by a company in the space. Or if you decide you want to run with it on your own, you can build a great business that way too. So I think those are all good options, and we're interested in talking with companies who are building cool things like that.
Who did you guys acquire?
Unannounced.
TBD. So I'll ask one more question of you guys, and this is one that you can pass on if it's confidential, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. But I was wondering if you're comfortable, if you can share one of your audacious goals for 2014.
Yeah, I would just say, getting one of the major banks onto the protocol is one. We think global identity is going to be another really key ingredient here. So some form of distributed global identity we think is going to be a really cool thing to work on.
Yeah, we've got a goal to have 100,000 merchants by the end of the year.
Nice, I like it. Bold.
Our big, hairy, audacious goal is to get to 10 million wallets on Blockchain.info by the end of the year.
I think we laid out 7 goals for the year. I'm not sure which I can talk about, but one of them was, we wanted to have 10 merchants doing over $1 billion in revenue, accepting Bitcoin through us. We have a bunch of others I probably shouldn't talk about. Yeah.
Good. All right. No, thank you guys for sharing. So why don't we open it up to questions? I'm sure a lot of you guys have things you want to ask the awesome panel.
So when you guys refer to the network and the core network, you're referring to the Bitcoin application network. So I'm a routing networking guy, the real core internet infrastructure. What do you guys think you need from the core internet structure to make your stuff work better?
You're referring to the core internet or the core Bitcoin protocol?
I'm talking about the core internet that's made up of routers and switches and links and fiber.
Gotcha. I honestly had not thought about that. Have you guys thought about that?
Yeah. We've
Keep making it as fast as possible.
I think we've actually set up to work on CJDNS. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but that can solve some of the DDoS problems that you can get on the internet. So I believe I'd have to talk to my co-founder, but I'm pretty sure you can work with Bitpay right now over CJDNS.
So would you want the internet to go faster for your type of applications, a la Netflix and net neutrality sort of things? Well, I guess that's the right type of question to ask app guys like you.
No, I mean, Bitcoin is a low bandwidth application, so it doesn't need streaming video type capabilities.
I mean, well, you need lots of transactions per second. I mean, these things need to get to Visa-like numbers, 100,000 per second. We think we're probably at about 1,000 per second, but we need to optimize on that. So you need to build really great tech teams that know about speed and reliability and always on.
Good question.
Hi, I'm Tom with BitOasis. I have a question about Blockchain.info. Especially what I got interested and amused about was the fact that you said you don't have a bank account or you're not using fiat money at all. So my question is, if you could confirm that you actually don't have a single bank account registered, and if so, what was the biggest hurdle that you had to overcome only using Bitcoin for your business?
Well, yeah, we do not have a bank account at Blockchain.info for sure, but I don't see that as a problem at all. It makes things much faster and easier for us. And also for entrepreneurs, like getting Bitcoin is not that easy in the United States. There still isn't an exchange here. So when we've done our acquisitions, it's a huge opportunity for someone to get hold of Bitcoins quickly. So those are things that motivate people, of course, as well. I don't know if there's anything else I can kind of elaborate on, but it's actually easier to hire and recruit people when you're going to tell them that you can pay their salary in Bitcoin. And I pitch them by having them basically, give them a spreadsheet and they input their salary from the previous year. And I say, if you would save 10 or 20% of your salary each month, but accepted it in Bitcoin, and then it calculates how valuable that would have been now. And every single one of our employees would have made more being paid in Bitcoin by almost an order of magnitude last year than they would have if they had taken a salary in dollars.
Hi, Amos Peterson, Apollo Systems. I just, kind of a follow-up question to the network engineer over there. I'm wondering if you guys are worried about traffic shaping or packet deprioritization or anything that could happen on the wild internet with your traffic. I mean, is that a concern? Or I think maybe things like that was what he was talking about. So.
I could take this one. I think the payment protocol is going to help with that, because once you've negotiated, I securely sign a payment request and your wallet picks it up, I've got a direct communication with you now. So you can send the payment directly to me, and we don't have to worry about the mesh network and lost packets. Now it's up to me then to rebroadcast that. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do at the protocol level, and this may be a better question for the technical panel. But a lot of things that you're seeing in some of the BIPs that haven't even been implemented yet can work on those issues.
Hi, I have a question about some of the applications you mentioned. You said that try to send money to Canada. That's a tough one in terms of just wiring and all that. But Bitcoin would potentially solve that problem. So my question is actually for Canada maybe is an easy solution. But what if you want to send to some other third world countries where they don't even have the infrastructure to say, I can receive the Bitcoin, but he still need to go out and buy his food, pay his rent in his local currencies. What if the country does not have that kind of support? Any thoughts about, it's more like treading on the line, the regulation for the different countries and all that. I think we're focusing on simply the use cases between user and user, but what about the surrounding environment that sort of create is actually essentially a bigger problem than just the Bitcoin itself. So
I think the question, just to reword, make sure we understood you, is how do we think about the development of Bitcoin liquidity around the world in other countries where you may be able to send Bitcoin, but then they can't use them or exchange them into fiat locally? Is that I don't know, Chris, did you have a thought on it?
Yeah, that is kind of our view, that this broader technology, distributed real-time settlement, an internet for value exchange, we believe will be used by most people using their existing things of value. So Indian rupee or Nepalese rupee, euro, yuan, airline miles, merchant reward points, gold, whatever you want to call a currency. So how do you do that? Well, you need to have what we would call gateways in each of those locations. That's going to handle local currency. And then you need market makers between those things of value. Market makers are simply going to be putting a bid-ask between Bitcoin and Indian rupee, for example. What's cool about these things is, again, there's no central operator. So these things are open to any local developers to either build a gateway or to be a market maker. And then it's just straight through processing. It's point to point. It either goes or it doesn't go. That's not how our current system works today. Payments can get lost in the middle. That's why they take so long, right? It's because each party has to do their part. Any part can fail. That's why it's so expensive. That's why this pre-internet system we have on Earth today for value exchange, is really suboptimal. And that's the excitement of Bitcoin and Ripple and the whole movement here is that you can do just that. But you do need integration to the existing systems so that people can go buy their food in whatever country. So I think it's a big task to do is building the infrastructure, but also then these bridges so that you increase the utility and the liquidity of the systems.
Yeah, I think the best analogy is probably in the mid-90s when we had ISPs. It was great that we had internet here and we could email each other, but you couldn't email somebody in Argentina because there wasn't an ISP in Argentina. But then an entrepreneur there figured out how to get the local telecom hooked up and let people dial in, and now they're part of the whole world. So I think it goes back to having liquidity in every major market, in every major country in the world. You're just going to have that. And then you're going to end up with 200 different separate liquidity pools, so you've got to find a way to bring these exchanges together. So if somebody in a market that doesn't have a lot of liquidity wants to make a large purchase, that exchange can act as a broker and go out to all the other exchanges and fill that order for that person. And then I think we get really efficient markets, and then we'll be able to do a lot of the stuff around the world that we'd like to do.
Yeah, and I think things like local Bitcoins are actually a great solution to that last mile problem that you described, where there might not be an exchange in their country, but there'll be somebody there who will trade the local currency for Bitcoin over a mobile device. And that, in a lot of cases, will help seed those local economies.
Sure. Next, yeah. Devin from DC Nexus. My main question was you guys don't seem like to be playing in alternate currencies at all. I just want to know what you think the future of alternate currencies are, especially from Bitpay. I can see that being a major portion for alternate currencies.
Sure. So we get asked this question a lot. I mean, right now we're focused on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the most counterfeit-proof form of payment. It's got the most mining power, it's got the best consensus, and it has the most liquidity. So when we act as an agent to process payments on behalf of merchants, and we have an obligation to settle to that merchant, we've got to have the payment method that is the most secure and the most liquid. When we see merchants add Bitcoin as a payment method, initially they get a nice little bump, and Brian can attest to this too. And typically the merchants say, hey, these are new customers. These are new customers that are coming to me. It's not an existing customer that just decided to not pay with their credit card on file and suddenly start paying with Bitcoin, right? This is a new customer. So when you look at some of the altcoins, are there really any new customers there? Is there any benefit to the merchant? Typically you'll find that anybody that's using one of the alternative coins is also a Bitcoin user. So to the merchant they're not gaining anything additive by adding that. Now, we're going to continue to evaluate it. We look at them. I think they're experiments, and just like experiments, maybe 99% of them will fail, but one of them may come up with a feature that's really interesting, and so we'll either switch to that one or add it, or maybe somebody will just take that interesting feature now that it's proven to work and add it into Bitcoin. So we monitor it very closely, but we definitely have to focus on the security and the liquidity for what we're doing as an agent.
And so on the Ripple protocol, you already have, anywhere you can pay for something with Bitcoin, you can use any altcoin that's on the Ripple protocol. So if you have Dogecoin on Ripple protocol, you can send those Dogecoin. They actually, to any Bitcoin address, they show up as Bitcoin to that merchant. Again, the Ripple protocol, we're just trying to be completely currency agnostic. So we welcome any altcoin, merchant rewards, airline miles, whatever thing of value humans think is important.
Yeah, I think clearly everyone here in the audience knows what Bitcoin is, but it's easy to forget that that's not true of everyone in the world. And so there's a pretty steep learning curve. If you go back and put yourself in the mindset when you first heard about Bitcoin, there's a lot to kind of get your head wrapped around. And our company is a lot of times we are that first experience people have with Bitcoin. And so we, at Coinbase at least, we try to think about making that learning curve as easy as possible. And if you kind of overwhelm people with all these niche use cases, I think it's better for the community to have them focus on one idea first. But I do like the fact that all these altcoins are coming up, and I think there's always going to be niche use cases for all different types of coins. We hired Charlie Lee, who created Litecoin, for example. He's on the team, and he's very excited about Litecoin and Coinbase. But yes, in terms of getting wider adoption of this idea, while it's still very new, I think it helps the community to focus on the primary coin at the moment.
I definitely agree with these statements. I think, to me, Bitcoin is like this much better than the traditional financial system, and all the other altcoins flutter around it. And I think we really need to, as a community, to spend a lot of engineering time and a lot of user experience time getting Bitcoin right, and then looking at these other things. I think longer term, the reality is there's going to be hundreds of thousands of alternative currencies, and that's just the way it's going to be. And there's going to be a heck of a lot of noise in that space, and it's going to be confusing for people. But we have an obligation to get Bitcoin right today.
So nice segue, Jackson from Dogecoin here. I was just wondering what you guys think about microtransactions. You know, there's a lot of talk about how they have to take place off-chain, which is something that's kind of undesirable. So do you think that, you know, in a future iteration of the Bitcoin protocol, it's something that should be addressed at the core to facilitate microtransactions?
Yes, I do think so.
Good answer.
I agree as well. I mean, I think Gavin would be the right guy to talk to about this, of course, but it'd be really nice if the mining fees could come down a bit. I think a lot of miners leave it at the default setting, which is, you know, it's probably what, like 5 cents US or something right now, the default miner fee. And so it'd be nice if maybe those dials were turned down a bit and there was like a broader spectrum of everybody was kind of choosing their own settings. And so if you really needed to get it confirmed within 10 minutes, you'd pay this 0.0001. If you were okay, you know, 50% of the time in 10 minutes, you could dial it down. Hey, I don't need it confirmed for an hour. There should be a nice smooth kind of curve. And right now it looks more like a step function because a lot of people just leave the default setting. But again, that's a question for the core devs and Gavin. They probably have way more info on that than I do.
I'd like to see a market right there. I mean, it has to be decoupled from and not fixed. Like,
yeah. And the new 0.9 release takes it down an order of magnitude. So now it's half a cent instead of 5 cents. But yeah, I think you've got to get to the point where it's deterministic. There's a market-based approach to fees.
Yeah, we think it's important, obviously, micro payments. We don't have mining fees in the Ripple protocol. We have a security fee to eliminate DDoS attacks, about 100,000th of a penny.
Thinking long term, how do you guys think about what kind of risk does it pose that Bitcoin has actually just a few people that actually develop the core, and they're pretty powerful in what decisions they make, and also the mining pools are run by few entities at this point. And also maybe can you address the question of transactions per seconds that we're going to face at some point if Bitcoin becomes really big? What's going to happen? What are some things that you guys are seeing there?
So I think the question is about the governance of Bitcoin, how you think about it, whether you worry about it, and then specifically the transactions per second question.
I think I'm kind of okay with the core devs having a lot of control at the moment, and the reason is just because of the model of open source software behind it. You know, if someone wants to make a fork and there's like a loss of confidence in Gavin or a coup or something, you know, it's a great democratic system because if there's a fork of Bitcoin and 51% of the hashing power of the miners decide to upgrade, you know, by definition, that is the new longest chain, and so there's this great kind of check of power, if you will. I don't have as much thought around, you know, some of the different mining pools. Obviously, it's a concern, but I'm not sure I have a good solution on that one.
Sure. The mining pools are important, but keep in mind they're pools. You know, the actual hardware that's running is owned by many, many users, and so users can easily switch pools. I think it was maybe a month or a month and a half ago that one pool got like 40%. It was Ghash, and all hell broke loose on Reddit, right? Like the top 6 posts were like, please miners, point your equipment somewhere else. So there's a lot that people can do, and then you've got new technologies like P2Pool, which can kind of get rid of that. Now you make a little bit less money as a miner, but it's a lot, it's a lot safer for the overall network.
I would just say the transaction per second is a real thing to work on just as an industry, because it's not just so much matching like Visa's flow through, which again can be in the hundreds of thousands per second, but these things are kind of more than just a Visa, right? They're also trading it's going on in real time too. So every bid ask is another transaction. So I think you could get to just huge numbers of transaction requirements per second. Obviously, it's early. It seems like it will get there though.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that question about transaction per second. But according to my calculation, we can handle right now 7 transactions per second if you generate a new block every 10 minutes. And I think that the natural response would be to increase the block size when that happens. But still, I think we have a long way to go. And the biggest problem for Bitcoin today is the scalability issue. I have not seen any solution to this yet, and I think the fee will rise a lot in the future. What's your response to this?
Yeah, the 7 transaction per second number comes from the block size limit. A block can only be, I think, 1 megabyte in size, and there's some soft limits. But if you actually look at the number of transactions that are really taking place right now, it's maybe even not even 1 transaction per second. So we're not even becoming close to that. Even when we had the peak on Black Friday, we maybe made 1.5. So we have a long way to go. And when you look at the mining power, there's a tremendous amount of horsepower out there. There's no doubt in my mind that we've got more power than we need, to do Visa-type scale eventually. But we're still in beta. I mean, there's a reason why we're still at version 0 point something. It's because we want to make sure we get the bugs out before you really start to scale the protocol. You don't want to turn it on, full blast and then realize that there's a problem. So I think you'll start to see the block size limit increased when it needs to be. But in the long run, I think you can get rid of the block size limit entirely. I think you can have a market-based approach to this as well. If you're a miner and you make a really big, complicated block that takes a long time for somebody to verify, and somebody else at around the same time makes a smaller block that's cleaner, their work is going to be built upon. And so you as a miner have an incentive to make your blocks clean and tidy because you want your work built upon. So I think you can probably get away with the block size limit entirely, not just yet, but eventually, and the miners will kind of self-police it because they want to keep the blocks clean.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, software evolves over time. That's the nature of it, right? SMTP came out as a protocol. Spam was a huge problem. A lot of technology had to get invented around spam filtering and Gmail, for example, to solve those problems. So I don't think it's fair to look at the 0.9 or 0.8 version of Bitcoin and say, will it scale another 100x? Software takes time to mature, and I think we will get there.
I have a friend that's been traveling in South America for about 8 months now, and she's been paying for her hostels with credit cards, right? And I think Bitcoin is a much better solution for that problem. And so my question is, do you think 2 years from now, 3 years from now, all the travelers, young travelers that are traveling around the world, when do you think they've all been using Bitcoin instead of credit cards to pay for the hostels?
Yeah, so I can speak a little bit to this because I earn all my income in Bitcoin and I travel constantly. So I use BTC Trip, which lets me buy tickets to fly anywhere in the world with Bitcoin. I rent apartments all over the planet using 9flats.com with Bitcoin. And in a lot of the cities I've been to, there are more Bitcoin accepting merchants than here in the United States. In Argentina and Buenos Aires, there's probably 100 in that city. Santiago, Chile has a bunch. London and Paris are growing. In Berlin, there's a whole neighborhood where you can basically live on Bitcoin entirely today. So it's happening, and I think a lot of the ambassadors, especially in the Bitcoin space, that travel constantly, I mean, we are trying to encourage adoption wherever we go, and there are people that spend their lives convincing people as we travel to do that. So it's happening. It's going to take a little more time, but yeah, it's definitely a good story.
I think it kind of doesn't matter what currency you use at all when you have a world that is completely interconnected, like our world is with an information web is today. So everybody should be able to hold Dogecoin, Bitcoin, gold, silver, platinum, what airline miles, and then you just spend them, and they just show up magically as whatever that merchant who's on the other end of that credit card swipe wants to receive. And these technologies allow that to happen. So everybody gets to use what they want, and everybody gets to get what they want to get.
One thing is we often forget that people need credit to be able to pay for things on trips and stuff because they need to borrow money. What do we think about credit in Bitcoin? Is that a limitation?
Seems like a really good idea for an entrepreneur to go explore and build. Yeah, I
agree.
Totally agree.
No fundamental limitation why you couldn't build a lending service using Bitcoin.
Sure. I'm not sure I'd want to be in debt, naturally short Bitcoin. But if somebody wanted to build that, you might be able to find some customers.
You can't make loans in deflationary currencies. It's too dangerous. That's why governments don't allow that to happen. These things are really good for asset holders, not liability holders. But again, it doesn't matter because if you take, the lender can send it in Bitcoin, it shows up in dollars to the borrower, and you pay it back in whatever.
So maybe one last question.
Yeah, given how much money is going to be in this ecosystem, as we all imagine, we're already seeing companies start to stake out patent claims and IP. And given one of the core principles of Bitcoin was permissionless innovation, I'd like to hear from each of you, where are your companies in terms of applying for patents, and how do you view exploiting or using patents either defensively or offensively to promote an ecosystem where permissionless innovation was at its heart?
I think we're going to actually run out of time for everybody to answer that question.
We won't waste our time doing that at Blockchain.info. So.
We don't take any patents. Didn't patent anything.
Yeah, I think what is more important is to do a disclosure. So if you have big companies like IBM out there that are writing patents, we as startups at least want to be able to maintain, to be able to use what we have developed. And so you can file a disclosure, basically proof of prior art, that in case another company were to file a patent, you would still be able to use what you had developed. You just couldn't prevent somebody else from using it.
Good.
Can I say quickly on that? We actually do file patents, and I think it's really unfortunate because I wish software patents didn't exist, but if you have to use them defensively. It's like saying the rules of hockey should be changed so there's no checking in hockey. Unfortunately, the rules allow checking, so I feel like you have to have them defensively, but we would never use them offensively.
Good. Well, everyone want to join me in thanking these guys?